I don't know where to start. I guess I might as well say who I am. That's who I am. I'm a distinguished professor of urban systems engineering at the University of Toronto. I was here until 91, from 75 to 91, and then returned to Toronto, which is where I grew up. Recently, the last decade or more, I've been focused on cities, smart cities, things of that nature. I led the creation of the School of Cities at the University of Toronto, and I'm currently the director of the Urban Data Center there, and also director of the Center for Social Services Engineering. Everything I do now is related to cities by and large, and span a variety of areas, which I'm not going to go into. Instead, what I want to do is take to heart what the title of the panel is about, which is recollection. So this is not a technical talk. I don't want to bore you with all of that stuff, but I do want to talk about my own personal journey over a 5-month period as part of the Hearsay 2 project. I do want to say at the outset, Victor, the Blackboard architecture is still alive and well. Yeah, okay. When I was teaching something with respect to Watson, IBM's Watson, I phoned up Ferrucci, who's the head of the project, and I said, was that a Blackboard architecture? He said, yes, it was a Blackboard architecture. So Watson is a Blackboard architecture. I'm using it for some of the work we're doing in social services engineering. I'm not going to get into that, but it is alive and well. So as I said, this is a personal story and not a technical one. Many of you probably won't associate with it at all, but for me it's a story I have to tell because it represents a particularly important part of my life at the very beginning of my career. I arrived at CMU in late August of 1975, drove down from Toronto. Back then, Highway 79 ended around Zelienople, okay? And if you wanted to find your way to CMU and you've never been to Pittsburgh before, you had to find your way through the north side and all sorts of places in order to figure out how to get here. And that was a daunting task because all I had was a AAA map that was sitting beside me while I'm driving and trying to figure out. I tell you, there were a lot of stops along the way to review the map. Eventually, I started asking people, where is CMU? How do I get there? And I asked them, why aren't there street signs? Okay, so those of you who were here in the 70s, you will recollect that a lot of streets didn't have signs. And so when I asked that question, the response I got was, if you don't know where you are, you shouldn't be here. Okay, and if you remember back then, Pittsburgh was a set of neighborhoods, okay? And you literally stayed in that neighborhood, and if you crossed over to another neighborhood, it was a totally different world. And part of it is due to the geography of the area, which is over the hill, it was a steel mill. On this side, it was Squirrel Hill. I mean, totally different people, totally different environment. Okay, anyway, I eventually found my way to the island of yellow brick called CMU. And in the fall of '75, I attended the immigration course that they had for PhD students, which I presume is still operating here at CMU. It was a great opportunity to learn about what all the other faculty members are doing here. And one thing stood out in my mind when faculty members gave their presentation, and that was speech understanding research looked like the last thing in the world that I would want to do, okay? I did not want to go near that at all. I ended up with Rick over there as my first PhD supervisor. That didn't last very long because Rick bailed on me, and I still bear the scars of him leaving me alone here. But in that first year as a graduate student, now you got to understand, you know, we all came as an undergrad, okay? Luckily, I came from the University of Toronto, and I had a very strong computer science background, and so I actually knew how to program a computer. But, you know, after being here for 8 months, I think it was Rick who said to me, why don't you be part of the speech understanding project? And so there are a lot of things I didn't understand by saying yes. I said yes, of course, he's my supervisor. Why would I say no? So I said yes. What would I work on? I'd work on the syntax and semantics portion of the Hearsay 2 system. When was it? That was May 1976. and we were going to demo in September. Okay, so
No, early September.
Yeah, it was September. Believe me.
That was the end of the 5-year.
That was the end of the 5-year project, and believe me, that also is burned into my brain. Anyway, in light of Steve Crocker's statement about CMU's expertise in speech understanding, you may ask the question, what expertise did I bring to the project? It's a damn good question. Nothing. Anyway, returning my story, little did I realize I would spend the next 4 to 5 months, day and night, in the bowels of Science Hall. And the bowels of Science Hall is not a place to put any impressionable young person. Okay.
Certainly not with Victor doing yoga.
Wait, I'm going to get to Victor. Victor does not. Victor is not left out in this. Anyway. I remember it turns out I got an apartment in South Oakland, and that's a story in of itself. And I would walk through Oakland to get to CMU every day to work all day, all night. When I was allowed to go home, I'd go home and sleep a bit. I remember walking out one day, walking along Forbes, and all these Pitt students, this is I guess September, beginning of September, all these Pitt students were in the street. I go up to a cop and I said, "What's going on?" And he looked at me like I was the biggest idiot. I just got off the moon. I had no idea that Pitt played football. I had no idea that they won a major game, okay? All I know is a path from my apartment to the bowels of Science Hall.
It was called Science Hall.
It's called Science Hall. Okay, I'm sticking to 75, 76 right now. Anyway, nor did I realize that in that experience of working for those 5 months, that the Coke machine would become my best friend. And nor did I realize that I would be greeted every day by Victor Lesser bending over with his pants down partially. Anyway, that is seared in my mind. Scars. I have a lot of scars. Anyway, so what was I doing there? I said I was supposed to work on the syntax and semantics module. Jack Mostow, who is a longtime friend, had been working for, a year or so on syntax and semantics module?
It's a long time ago.
Yeah, you don't remember. He spent a considerable amount of time, and if you measure the time based upon the weight of the printout paper, it was more like a decade, okay? Huge amount of paper. Anyway, Jack decided in the last 5 months of the project that he's going to leave CMU and bike around the United States, okay? You can tell from that I'm pretty dumb, okay? Should have been obvious to me that there would be a good reason why the person responsible for the syntax and semantics module, which plays a pretty significant role in the Hearsay 2 architecture, would leave at that point, okay? So, they dumped it on me. They gave me this huge stack. It's like 4th down and 30 yards to go to the goal line for the project. And he takes off on his bicycle trip. So my job was to get his module working. It hadn't been working yet, okay? My job was to get his module working. I must have taken about a month to go through it and figure out what was going on. And during this time, Jack would phone from telephone booths, like in Donner's past, he would be phoning and trying to explain to me how this code worked. I had no clue, okay? And I got some of the smartest people around me. You know, you got Lee there, Victor there, Rick there, etc., okay? Trying to help me understand this thing. I don't think any of us could really understand what was going on. So the fateful decision was made that we would utilize this code in a manner that foreshadowed how his thesis was going to be used. And that was as a doorstop. Anyway, that's another story. Anyway, behind the scenes, you know, Lee and Rick and Victor were doing their magic. They figured out they're going to divide this module into two separate modules. Lee was going to do his magic on the syntax module. I was going to do the semantics side of the module, and Rick was working, as he said earlier, the semantic grammar and things of that nature. And we had, I don't know, 2-3 months before the demo to make this all work. Now, my part of the module was the semantics interpreter. So Rick made it seem like that magically the grammar would identify the final answer, okay? But in reality, there were still lots of fragments, and there was not necessarily the case that a single hypothesis spanned the entire time. Okay, so we had lots of different hypotheses on the blackboard, all competing with each other with various levels of certainty associated with it. And my job was to take those fragments and figure out, given the semantic grammar, which subset of them was a maximally consistent interpretation of what was recognized. And so I built that system. That's another thing. It was implemented, it was running. Jack returned at the end of August to look over my shoulder in the last 2 weeks. And the day of the DARPA demo, and we were up 24 hours a day continuously, the day of the demo, Lee speaks into the microphone. The hearsay 2 modules fire. Syntax recognizes a sentence. A cheer goes up. Everybody turns away from the monitor to congratulate themselves. I'm the only one standing there looking at the monitor because my module hadn't fired, my knowledge source hadn't fired yet, okay? Then my knowledge source fired. And what happened? It failed. Okay, I'm the only one who knew that. Okay, everybody else was you know, just really, really happy, and you know, the whole thing was a success, etc. And so, 2 things happened. One is I did an investigation as to why the module failed afterwards. And somebody on the team committed the cardinal sin of demos, and that is making a change the night before. Okay. Rick, thank you very much. You changed the grammar the night before and never told me, so I was using a different one, and I don't know why. It's
Total ignorance.
But that was why. Anyway, but the funniest thing that happened to me was right after the demo, I went down to the office, the computer science office, where all the mailboxes are, and I'm checking to see if I got any mail at that time. And Jack walks in. He's been up for 48 hours. I've been up for 48 hours. He walks in like this. and he didn't even know he was doing that. And he's blinking, and he looks at me, and he says, "Mark, are you okay?" Anyway, I can't say that my experience led me to a career in speech understanding, but it certainly was formative in everything else that I've done in my career. But like everybody else, I can say that I had an experience that few people have, working night and day as part of an amazing team of researchers, forged in the fires of Science Hall, focused on a single project, on a single goal, and who to this day remain my family.
Thank you.